It actually seems to be true that up to 400 Russian soldiers have been cut off in the north of Ukraine by Ukrainian forces. We'll talk about what we know about this exactly, what it means, and we'll talk about successful Ukrainian counterattacks and developments along other parts of the front line where the Russians still hold the initiative and gained additional ground. We also talk about political things, like, for instance, the results of the peace conference in Switzerland, and we'll talk about how many tanks the Russians can actually produce, because we have a new estimate about the Russian production capacity when it comes to T-90M main battle tanks. So this is the second recording because OBS likes to turn off my microphone. And once again, those who are here longer might have seen it in the past that occasionally once a month, once every 2 months, I upload a video that is without sound. So I'll have to record it once again here. We'll start off with Russian attacks that have been reported by the Ukrainians in both areas where the Russians have crossed over the border. I cannot see them having any success, but we do see some successes of the Ukrainians that have been reported here. The Ukrainians were able, we have geolocalizations where they have been able to enter Huliapole. Hliboke, I'm sorry, was a different town. Hliboke, they have entered here. This is here, and we have Ukrainian presence visually confirmed here and here. The bad thing about this is that the video shows Russian soldiers attacking Ukrainians in here. I cannot confirm the end result, whether they managed to take it, but it at least seems likely according to the video, even though without the complete end, there's always a possibility that it was cut to show a success. This wouldn't have been the first time. The second video shows a Ukrainian wheeled IFV, the BTR-4, being destroyed here, and it seems to be abandoned. So it might have been that the counterattack has failed, that the Ukrainians here were taken out, and that they lost the BTR-4 that was here. It might also mean that the Ukrainians are still in here, but it at least proves to us that the counterattacks had been temporarily successful in this region here. This much at least we have visual proof in this area. The eastern part, east of it, we have developments in Vovchansk, and here the Ukrainians actually managed to cut off some Russian soldiers. Now, the informations are somewhat unclear. We know that the Russians are in here. We have a visual proof of this, and this showed Ukrainian planes attacking it with glide bombs, with probably JDAM, that have struck this building. So we know the Russians are down here. The exact details are unclear. We have confirmations from the Russian side, partial confirmations, and the estimates go between 200 to 400 Russian soldiers. The lowest I found was 50. This could be an estimate of soldiers still being alive. Mashovets, a former lieutenant colonel, probably former at least lieutenant colonel of the Ukrainian armed forces that has been referenced here a couple of times, he spoke about 200 Russian soldiers. The Russian soldiers supposedly meant to cross the river were caught by Ukrainian soldiers and had to withdraw in their building, and here they are stuck now for several days. The only reinforcement, the only supply they're getting is coming by drones, but it's insufficient, and the Russians try to reconnect several times across here, but any attempt fell through because of Ukrainian fire once they tried to cross that road. The important part is, though, the Ukrainians do not hold these buildings. They have positions in the south and they have positions in the north. They actually attacked here in the north. So theoretically, there is a way to connect both of them, but as of now, the Russians have not been able to do so. The exact number is also unclear, and there are first videos claiming to show that the first Russians are capitulating. Now, this video, I have not seen a conclusive geolocalizations. Supposedly that should be right next to the plant. We see one Russian soldier giving himself up. Theoretically it could be somewhere here, but I have not seen. As you could see, there is basically not much visible except some green areas and a small river next to it. We have one of the pro-Ukrainian maps, Spatial Grounds, who is fairly accurate, shows this here right now, just for full to show everything that he's showing. He shows the Russians are in here, they're cut off, and actually Ukrainian attacks happening in the north towards the west. Now this almost looks like they're in the process of cutting off those as well. I have not seen evidence of this yet, especially that they are in danger of being cut off, but at least we see some mappers showing it. And as I said, spatial ground is not, to my experience, somebody who exaggerates massively, so this might be true. I am just not able to confirm it as of yet. So what we do have is a confirmation that there are Russian soldiers here, that they lost contact with the western part. They don't have a ground line of communication, and the Ukrainians try to destroy them in here. Supposedly some capitulations already. Another video shows some Russian soldiers giving themselves up, but this was not, I wasn't able to confirm that it is in any connection to this here. As of now, it actually seems they are cut off. Now, obviously, 50 to 400 is different by the factor 8. We would talk about one squadron in a first way, the lower number, and the bigger number would be half a battalion. That would be significant, but then again, 400 men is what the Russians might lose on the ground in attacks per day. So while this might be an impressive victory, if everything turns out, it's only going to be of tactical importance, not even of operational, probably, in this regard. We do have an additional Ukrainian success confirmed in the east, though. While the Russians keep attacking here, I do not see that they have had any success in this regard, but it's now confirmed that the Ukrainians gained 1 kilometer in depth and 2 kilometer in width in the Serebryanske forest. Now here again, the fighting is probably for 1.5 years in there, and now and then one side takes a few positions, but overall this is probably of no importance whatsoever, and one side loses a little, the other side gains a little. That's happening fairly often here, and this time the Ukrainians came out the better. South of the Siversky Donetsk, we have a change here, and here the Russians have reached Rostolivka now in the west as well. We have visual evidence of this, that they have reached the southwestern part or the western part, depending on how you want to. I guess it's more the western part of Rostolivka. In the last situation report, I showed you that the Russians have been here and here as well. So the whole west, southwest, and east is now in contact with the Russians. The fighting for Rostolivka has begun. I have not seen any serious evidence that the Russians have entered the Rostolivka, so it's now directly along the front line, but it doesn't seem like the Russians have been able to gain a foothold inside of the town itself. From Chasiv Yar, I do not have any visual change that I can confirm. Now there is a video of Kazivek by the Ukrainians that is operating in the area here along the canal, showing that the front line here is definitely, the Russians haven't crossed over, but we have the Russians claiming, the Ukrainians claiming that the Russians have intensified the usage of chemical weapons in Chasiv Yar. The Ukrainians are claiming that unknown chemicals have been added to the chloroprizin. This is a riot control agent that can lead to lung damage and to death if the persons afflicted are under a lot of effect by it. And while it's a riot control agent, it has to be said that this is already illegal by the Chemical Weapon Convention, which Russia has signed. Even tear gas is illegal according to the Chemical Weapons Convention, so Russia is not allowed to use them. They still do it, and while we do not have proof that they have I haven't seen proof that they have intensified the use, while I did not see any proof that they added unknown chemicals, there is visual evidence of Russian soldiers using a drone to drop hand grenades for gas. So we do know there is visual evidence of the Russians using chemical weapons in the war in Ukraine. So far, we do have proof of this, at least this is proven. Further east and south, I do not have any change that can be confirmed. Klishivka and Andrivka, no change here, but we do have changes in the area of Avdivka. Now here I have a Ukrainian mill blogger confirming and admitting defeat in Novo-Oleksandrivka. He admits that the Russians gained some foothold inside of town and several of the tree lines to the north and the east. We have this here on the Ukrainian deep state map already, that the tree lines to the north and east of Novo-Oleksandrivka have fallen. And obviously this is one of the most dangerous advances the Russians are having, because should they reach the road here, the whole line of communication, the whole ease of communication between the north and south of the front line would be in danger. So this is one of the most critical points for the Ukrainians in this whole Donetsk region right now, probably where the Russians are putting the most pressure on them. We also have visual evidence of the Russians at Sokil attacking in this direction here. Here, the Russians have been spotted here, and further south we have visual evidence of them crossing the river at Umanske. Now here, this is where the second one is this was the first one, and this is the second one. They have crossed over the river here and trying to push north. Now, they have taken Novopokrovsk a couple of days ago. They have taken Umansk a couple of days before, and now they obviously try to straighten the front line. I talked about it in the last situation report. The map implies that the Ukrainians will have to withdraw fairly soon, so we shouldn't be surprised with it if within a few days the front line is more or less straight down here. Further south, I have no change until Krasnohorivka, and here the Russians managed to cross the next road and advance somewhat into the buildings here. We have a visual evidence of this as well, where they have been spotted in the last big building, so their advance is now reaching the smaller buildings here. The fast advance in Krasnohorivka has been stopped by the Ukrainians. Initially, it was estimated by both sides that Krasnohorivka will fall quickly if the brick factory here has fallen into Russian hands. This has turned out to not be true. The fighting is still continuing, and the Russian advance there has slowed down. The Russians have also not been able to gain anything further south, according to what I found, but they managed to advance further in Staromayorsk. Here is a visual evidence of them clearing the northern part of Staromayorsk. They are walking on the main road here, implying that those houses are all fully under their control yet, and probably the western part as well. I cannot fully confirm this, but I guess it's not wrong to estimate that Staromayorsk is either in the process of falling or has fallen as of now. Further west at Orikhiv, in the Orikhiv region, there's a weird report by the Russians. The Russian Ministry of Defense is claiming that they captured the town of Sahirne, which is here, and it's behind the front line for a year, more or less. So Russian mill bloggers are confused. Some say, this is in a lowland and we weren't able to establish full positions there, permanent positions. This has changed now. This is the report. Other Russian military bloggers say, though, that this is part of the Ministry of Defense inventing successes to make Belousov, the new defense minister, appear more successful. Obviously, by claiming to have taken towns that have already been taken, they are not really lying. They can't be shown that they claim a town that's still under Ukrainian control. So this could mean something like this. But as said, as of now, we can only speculate why the Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that this town was taken when it's already under Russian control for many, many months. Fighting is also continuing here at Robotine and Verbove, and fresh in a couple of hours ago, Russian sources claimed that the Ukrainians did another amphibious landing at Kharkiv. Now, this would imply that there wasn't any Ukrainian presence anymore in Kharkiv. I cannot confirm this, even though it might be true. It might just be a reinforcement landing of fresh troops into Kharkiv. It might be that the Ukrainians had withdrawn or were pushed out and have now returned. I have no idea so far. I have only seen it under Russian sources, so it might be not true whatsoever. Completely false. I don't know. But fighting is definitely continuing here, and the Russians are claiming that fighting is continuing in Kharkiv. We have news from the Crimean Peninsula as well, and there the reports are that the Russians are refurbishing old airfields. Now, obviously, in World War II and in the Cold War, there were a lot more military airfields in the region. as the air forces were bigger and as they needed airfields to redeploy. And now with the pressure coming from the Ukrainian attacks on the air defense and on the airfields on the Crimean Peninsula, we now have signs that this has already an effect. According to reports, the Russians are refurbishing several of the airfields to be able to shovel their planes around. It obviously makes it much harder to hit them if you don't really know in which airfield they are. And this seems to be the case as of now, showing one of the successes of the Ukrainian campaign to reduce the Russian forces on the Crimean Peninsula. In the overall situation, we have, I guess, partially good news. The Ukrainian General Staff reported on the 16th that until then, in June, 1,050 gliding bombs were used by the Russians. That's 65 a day. But Zelensky just said a couple of days before that the Russians were using 3,200 to 3,500 a month. That's 110 per day. So the number has almost halved in June. We can only speculate why. Could they run out of bombs? That seems unlikely. Could the production of their gliding sets have been reduced? That seems unlikely as well. So my speculation would be that this is the clear result of the official permissions to use Western air defense systems deep into Russia. The US president, as far as I remember, said, of course, they are allowed to strike them if they are being attacked from there. Germany has given permission too. This is in contrast to what was reported before, as the Russians lost several helicopters and planes roughly 1.5 years ago in Bryansk. This was reported to have been done with a German Patriot system, and the claims are that the German government was furious because the Ukrainians used the air defense systems shooting into Russia without permission. Now this permission at least was given officially, and this could obviously be already have an effect in easing the pressure on the Ukrainian forces. But I said to some degree that's simply my speculation. The good news is, regardless, the gliding bomb attacks have gone down roughly 40%, which is obviously a very good news, as this is one of the most dangerous things the Ukrainian soldiers are facing. In troop generation, we have an example of how much the Russians are increasingly relying on foreigners. We have Dva Majors here, the two majors, and they are telling the example here that foreigners often don't speak Russian that are fighting there. And here it was a case that a Ukrainian drone came down and these fighters joyfully ran up like children by God, and they began to touch the drone and lift it up, and then it blew up and caused casualties among it. So a sign how prevalent foreigners are becoming in the Russian armed forces. We talked about this in past situation reports, that Nepalese, Sri Lankans and Africans are appearing in ever bigger numbers. In the last situation report, I told you that the Russians have increased the signing bonus for volunteers up to 4 times or even higher than this. Another sign that the Russians are increasingly getting under pressure when it comes to manpower. It's no longer that easy to find volunteers. And this is one of, obviously, their armed forces are relying on personnel, but they're also relying on material. And here we have the IISS making a study about the T-90M production. And here they came to the conclusion that before February of 2022, the Russians were producing 40 T-90M new T-90Ms a year. Last year, they were already at 60 to 70, and in 2025, they will have reached over 90 probably. So they doubled the production rate, even a little higher than this, which is obviously good news for Russia. But at the same time, in 2025, maybe 2026, the Russian tank storage will run out. We are getting closer to the point where the Russians increasingly will have no more old tanks to refurbish, or where the number of refurbishable tanks will trickle away, and thus new production will be decisive. And here we will definitely see an effect. Now, T-90Ms aren't the only ones they're producing. They also have restarted production of the T-80 BMV, yeah. They also have restarted that production, but it's clear that the yearly production is nowhere close to the current losses. So at that point, the Russians will either have to do far, far less attacks or far less mechanized attacks, so focusing more on infantry, and there the infantry losses will be even higher, and thus the recruitment of fresh personnel will be more important. That at the time where the Russians are increasingly getting more difficulties finding volunteers to recruit. So while that is not a change in the tide of war, this would be too much. It's still some light at the end of the tunnel for Ukraine, as they know the Russian reserves and the Russian recruitment will not be unlimited, and it will not be successful in huge numbers forever. The Russian resources have limits themselves, and this is one of the examples. Then we have news about the political sphere, and here there's no way avoiding talking about the conference here. Now, I've read comments that this was a success because so many foreign heads of government came, so many nations came to a conference like this. Like, there was big praise how successful it has been. Part of it was that the final communique that everyone was supposed to sign was asking for territorial integrity and national sovereignty of Ukraine. And here we see that a lot of the countries, it was obvious that they are going to sign, be it Central Western Europe, be it North America, be it Australia and New Zealand also has signed, which you don't see here on the map. Japan obviously also has signed. A little surprise, or maybe a good surprise, will be the signatures from Argentina, Chile, Peru, and Ecuador here. But the bigger issue is who has not signed. And here we see that Brazil hasn't signed, Mexico hasn't, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, South Africa, India, and Indonesia. Big countries, powerful countries, influential countries were not willing to sign that Ukraine's national sovereignty and its territorial integrity have to be re-established. They were not willing to do this. This is after China not participating, probably a political defeat. Now, as said, there are other interpretations that the overall conference was still successful. Maybe they are right. Leave a comment in the comment section if you disagree with me. But for me, having nations sign up that are either not without influence or where you expect them to sign up anyways is not really a success, not really a big success. If Russia is supposed to stop this war without being defeated on the battlefield, then influential nations have to put up pressure, and there China would be the most important one. They didn't even participate. India might have more influence on Russia as well, at least some influence. The other ones mentioned might be important as well, and they have refused to sign up. So in my mind, the whole peace conference, unfortunately, probably was not a success. Let's put it this way. Then we have Trump saying that in front of the Turning Point Action, he had a speech where he said that the best salesman in the world right now is Zelensky, the Ukrainian president. Whenever he goes to the US, he leaves with 60 billion. And even as president-elect, he's going to stop that immediately. Now, obviously, I have no clue how he wants to stop national aid that has been signed off by parliament, which is under control of the president, to stop if he's not president yet. If he wins in November, then he's going to be president-elect until his inauguration in January. But he has no power at that point, at least if I'm not completely mistaken in the US Constitution. That's still the old Congress. That's still the old president running the country until that point. So how he wants to stop that, I have no idea how he comes to that conclusion. But obviously, we need to take out of it that he says he's going to stop. He's going to stop Russia. He's going to stop the US giving aid to Ukraine as soon as he's president. Now, this might be in the context of the election campaign, where he might give contradicting things. He recently said he would have bombed Moscow in case of an attack. He confirmed that he had other things. He's flip-flopping a little bit around, but we have to say at the same time, with Joe Biden, we never heard something like this. So yeah, there might be hope for some pro-Ukrainian Republicans that he might not do it this way, and maybe that hope is justified. But as of now, we simply need to see that he says something that Biden has not said when it comes to Ukraine. For Europe, that should obviously be an urgent wake-up call, as should have been the last half year where the Congress blocked aid. This is mostly a European war. Europe should focus on producing what Ukraine needs and take US aid on top to rely on the US, and this could end in a disaster. And if Trump wins, he might initiate that disaster. And that was it from me for now. No, I have one more news. Actually, I have two more. I'm sorry. First, we have the Financial Times saying that abducted Ukrainian children have been put up for adoption under false identity, obviously to hide their origin, to allow Ukrainian children to be Russified in Russian families. Thanks at this point, by the way, thank you to the viewer who gave me advice how I can open those paywalled articles without paying for him. Thank you very much. You allowed me to read this today. And this is one of the accusations that are being hurled against Russia, basically almost since the beginning of the war, and one of the reasons why Maria Lvova-Belova and while Putin are being searched with an international arrest warrant for the theft of Ukrainian children. And now, according to the claims, the Russians want to hide the origin of the children to allow them for adoption in Russia without allowing the parents or the relatives to find them anymore. Another sign of their theft of Ukrainian children. And Russia has appointed his niece as deputy defense minister. Now, I'm not a Russia expert, so if they make something about this, listen to them. I have no idea why that is. Like, supposedly she has a company that does coal, produces coal. That I have no idea how that qualifies as defense minister. That she's a billionaire, I'm not sure that this is relevant in this context. I would guess maybe that's to have some family members in there to tighten control over the defense ministry, to prove it more against coups, because you have an insider there who is loyal to you, not just out of decision but by blood. But that's my interpretation. I have no idea if this is anywhere close to the truth. So if you have an expert, if there's an expert about Russia saying something different, believe that person, not me, when it comes to this. But probably still an interesting news fact about this, about the political changes in Russia. That was it from me for now. If you like this situation report, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment in the comment section about what you think about the peace conference, or if you enjoy now and then watching a situation report without sound and to improve your lip reading, then I could maybe do this more often. And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.